Close your eyes. Picture this. You're floating through an endless silver void. No up, no down. Just infinity in every direction. Time doesn't exist here. Your thoughts ripple through the air like waves on water, and in the distance, something massive takes shape from the swirling mists. A fortress, carved from the corpse of a dead god. Red dragons circle its spires. Their riders carry blades that gleam like starlight. Silver swords, weapons that can cut through more than flesh. They can sever your soul. You've just stumbled into Githyanki territory, and they really, really don't like visitors. But here's the thing about the Githyanki. These cosmic raiders, these dragon-riding tyrants who terrorize 1,000 worlds. They weren't always the monsters. Their story, it begins in chains. Before we dive into how they became this way, hit that subscribe button. This rabbit hole goes deep, and you're going to want to see where it ends up. Rewind, way back. Long before the Githyanki became the scourge of the multiverse, their ancestors were just people, regular humanoids. We don't even know what they called themselves. That knowledge was tortured out of them. By Mind Flayers. You know Mind Flayers, right? Tentacle-faced nightmares who eat brains like popcorn? Yeah, those guys. Turns out enslaving entire civilizations was their idea of a perfectly reasonable Tuesday. The Illithid Empire spanned countless worlds, multiple planes of existence, and they had this hobby, this passion project, taking normal people and breaking them, selective breeding, psychic manipulation, good old-fashioned torture, all to create the perfect warrior slaves. For untold centuries, these proto-Githyanki suffered. The Mind Flayers were playing God, reshaping bodies, rewiring minds, yellow skin, rough like leather, black eyes sunken deep into angular skulls, ears sharp and serrated at the back, limbs stretched long and gaunt. The Illithids manipulated them through untold horrors, forced evolution, psychic reshaping. They bred them for war, not as meek mind slaves, honed their psychic potential like sharpening a blade. And they were good at it, too good. Because here's the thing about breeding the perfect psychic warriors. A psionic foe, no matter how submissive, is a more serious threat to a Mind Flayer than a non-psionic one. Eventually, they might just realize they outnumber you. As the gifts developed their abilities, they became more difficult to control. The Mind Flayer masters grew increasingly brutal in their attempts to keep them subservient and obedient. How do you overthrow an empire that spans dimensions and can literally read your mind? Simple. You need a spark. Every revolution has one. George Washington, Joan of Arc. For the Githyanki, that was a woman named Gith. The legends can't agree on who she was. Some say she was a powerful slave to a powerful Illithid master, serving as the creature's personal bodyguard and a champion of the Illithid Empire. Others claim she was just a child soldier, a lowly foot soldier, barely more than a kid. But here's what we do know. Gith possessed something the Mind Flayers couldn't breed out, couldn't control, couldn't suppress no matter how hard they tried. Pure, concentrated, hatred. And she wasn't alone. Across the Illithid Empire, something was happening. The slaves were developing psychic abilities, strong ones, abilities that made them harder to control. The Mind Flayers responded the only way they knew how. More brutality, tighter chains, harsher punishments. Small revolts erupted among the Giths, as among other populations of slaves. They were crushed, violently, brutally suppressed. The cycle continued, until Gith did something unprecedented. She united them all. Something about Gith, her great charisma, her ability to form alliances among different groups of rebellious slaves, or perhaps just the consuming fire of her hatred and rage, made her successful where so many others had failed miserably. Different groups, different worlds, different backgrounds. She forged them into one unified force, and when she gave the signal, they rose, like a mighty wave sweeping away the foundations of the Illithid Empire. The Illithid Empire didn't fall, it shattered. This eternal, unbreakable dynasty crumbled like sand castles at high tide. The struggle was long and vicious, but eventually the people freed themselves. They had earned their freedom and became the Githyanki. In their tongue, children of Gith. They set out to ensure no Mind Flayer would ever enslave anyone again. At Gith's command, her followers launched a crusade to topple every Mind Flayer stronghold and annihilate the Illithids. It should have been a happily ever after. It wasn't. Fresh from victory, the Githyanki faced the question that has plagued every successful revolution in history. Now what? Gith had an answer. Keep fighting, hunt down every last Mind Flayer, conquer worlds, build an empire that would make the Illithids look like amateurs. As Gith was forging her own burgeoning empire, not everyone agreed. Enter a leader named Zerthamon, the party pooper of the Githyanki revolution. He looked at Gith's plans for endless conquest and saw something disturbing. They were becoming exactly what they'd fought to destroy. He claimed Gith's drive for vengeance and new conquests was evidence of species-wide mental programming laid by the Mind Flayers. Biological manipulation that condemned her people to continued servitude. And Gith? She was playing right into it. The philosophical debate quickly became decidedly unphilosophical. This claim split the Gith. Those who followed Gith kept the name Githyanki. Those who followed Zerthamon called themselves Githzerai, in their tongue, those who spurned Gith. And it sparked a civil war that's still ongoing to this day. What followed was carnage. Brother fought brother. Former comrades turned their psychic blades on each other. The same unity that toppled an empire now tore itself apart. The civil war was so devastating that neither faction could continue their crusade against the Mind Flayers. Too weakened by years of conflict to pursue their mission, the very thing they'd fought for, the complete annihilation of the Illithids, slipped through their fingers. The Githzerai retreated to Limbo, the plane of pure chaos. The Githyanki found a new home in the most unlikely of places, the astral plane. Imagine an endless silver sea, same above and below, swirling wisps of white and gray, motes of light like distant stars, a great silvery expanse, vast and mostly empty. Time doesn't exist here. You don't age, don't need food, don't need water. Occasionally a corpse of a dead god just floats by like cosmic driftwood. Visitors sometimes stumble upon the petrified remains of these fallen deities, chunks of rock drifting forever in the silvery void. More common are color pools, magical pools of colored light that flicker like radiant spinning coins. For the Githyanki, it was perfect. Led by Gith's advisor, a wizard named Vlaakith, they established massive fortress cities in the astral plane, floating fortresses of stone and steel, looming stark against the swirling background of astral infinity. The greatest of these? Tunareth, built inside the fossilized corpse of a dead god. Because when you're establishing your civilization's capital, why not make a statement? A grand statue of Gith stands beside the palace, obsidian, over 100 feet tall, watching over everything. But there was a catch. While the astral plane meant no aging, no hunger, no mundane concerns, it also meant their children couldn't grow. Birth and growth are impossible on the astral plane, whose occupants don't age. So the Githyanki established hidden creches on the material plane, training camps where their young are raised in brutal conditions that would make Sparta look like daycare. Githyanki hatch from eggs. Each newborn enters the world alongside other eggs, deliberately laid so that all hatch at the same time. Since Githyanki adults must return to the astral plane to keep from aging significantly, the roster of instructors continually changes. No adults stay longer than a few months, and none ever return for a second stint. The instruction young Githyanki undergo is unrelenting and unforgiving. Combat practice starts with scoring wounds. In the early stages, a drill lasts only until blood is drawn. Later, near the end of training, a drill of the same sort might be a fight to the death, the ultimate way of weeding out all those who don't meet Vlaakith's standards. To the Githyanki, it's better for a weakling to die in training than to undertake a mission and imperil a warband. As a crop of youngsters grow older, more and more is demanded from each student. and the penalties for failing to keep up become more and more severe. By the time Githyanki come of age, they've heard years of stories about Vlaakith and her immortal warriors dwelling in the silvery void. They're told they're on the verge of entering the Queen's realm, each one destined for greatness. Their skills have proven them worthy. Now only their loyalty to the revered Queen remains to be determined. But first, one final test. They must slay a Mind Flayer, a sacred rite of passage. No exceptions. When the victors enter to Nareth for the first time, they carry the bounty of their hunt directly to Vlaakith herself. She accepts the gift, intones a ritual chant that marks their induction into Githyanki society. Now let's rewind. Back when the Githyanki were first settling the astral plane, Vlaakith advised Gith to seek allies. They still had enemies, the Mind Flayers, the Githzerai. They needed help. Vlaakith first appealed to the Slaadi, natives of Limbo, seeking to enlist them to help destroy the Githzerai. The chaotic Slaadi weren't interested in any kind of agreement, so Vlaakith turned to a deity of conquest. So where do you go for allies when you're building a cosmic empire? The Nine Hells, obviously. Gith herself ventured into the infernal realms to meet with Tiamat, five-headed dragon goddess of greed, conquest, and mine. What happened next depends on who you ask. Only speculative legend tells what happened in this meeting, but the results are well documented. The official story, Gith negotiated an alliance. Red dragons would serve the Githyanki forever. The terms were sealed, but Gith never returned. Although Gith herself has not been seen since, Ephilamon, a fierce red dragon who serves as one of Tiamat's consorts, traveled to the astral plane to give Vlaakith word of the agreement. First, red dragons would forever be the allies of the Githyanki race, aiding them in their unending mission of conquest. Second, Gith had named Vlaakith as her successor to lead the Githyanki and carry on Gith's legacy of conquest. He would not say what happened to Gith. Convenient, right? But here's the whispered version. The heresy spoken only in shadows. Vlaakith didn't negotiate an alliance. She sold Gith out. Vlaakith sacrificed the Great Mother to Tiamat. The price? Those dragons the Githyanki now ride, and absolute power for herself. Some even say Gith had nurtured a son. Orpheus, they called him. Prince of the Comet. The true heir. When he learned of Vlaakith's treachery, when he knew his mother's sacrifice, he rallied Gith's honor guard and declared the throne for himself. The War of the Comet had begun. The conflict raged across the astral plane. Dragon fought dragon. Knight clashed against knight. And Orpheus, at the head of the honor guard, mounted on red dragons, cried out for all to hear. Praise be to my mother Gith, queen of the one sky, sacrificed to the hells by the renegade Vlaakith. The histories say he died. Commander Voss, so they claim, pierced the prince clean through with his sword of silver. His flesh was torn and fed to the great red dragon Ephilamon. But some believe differently. They whisper that Orpheus lives, imprisoned by Vlaakith, waiting. Vlaakith took power and never let go. Literally. With Gith perished or otherwise disposed of, her advisor Vlaakith assumed rule of the Githyanki. Vlaakith is now as much a title as a name, born for the past 1,000 years by a lich queen who is perhaps the greatest of her line. She became a lich, an undead wizard of incredible power. With the power only undeath can grant, the current Vlaakith has finally called for a new crusade. Think about that. 1,000 years. Under her iron fist, the Githyanki became exactly what Zerthimon warned against. This undead tyrant compels her people to wage endless wars against Mind Flayers, Githzerai, and any others that threaten Githyanki supremacy. Cosmic raiders, plunderers of worlds, not out of necessity, but because they can. Vlaakith sits on her throne of bones in her personal stronghold Susurrus, also called the Palace of Whispers, located deep inside Tunarath. The throne is a mighty artifact, crafted from Mind Flayer skulls and extremities. The cushion she sits on is made of leather produced from the cured remains of an elder brain. It's fueled by the intellects of Mind Flayers and elder brains defeated by her minions. She commands absolute loyalty, absolute obedience. Her knowledge of arcane magic equals that of entire conclaves of archmages. Her combat skill, the combined talents of hundreds of swordmasters, all absorbed from her most loyal servants. Oh, did I mention? When Githyanki prove themselves in battle, Vlaakith promises them a reward, a journey to paradise, to the wondrous realm that Gith discovered in her journeys, where Gith awaits those who have proven themselves worthy. At the culmination of a grand ceremony that supposedly readies them for their journey, the supplicants enter her inner sanctum. They're never seen again. In truth, instead of sending them to paradise, Vlaakith drains their souls, absorbs their strength, gains more power with every ascension. The greatest warriors, she devours them, and no one can say a word. Because to question Vlaakith is treason, and treason means death. The culture and society of the Githyanki are defined above all else by the constant readiness for war. Living on the astral plane means they need to spend little effort on what most races consider the basic necessities of life. This gives them the freedom to train most of their population in the craft of war. The majority of Githyanki are warriors, warlocks, or gish, the war-trained castes that command far greater respect and hold the reins of power. When Vlaakith decrees a raid, Tunarith erupts in anticipation. A Githyanki's skill in combat, whether measured by martial prowess or arcane achievement, ultimately determines their status in society. War is the ultimate expression of Githyanki culture, and their pitiless black eyes know no mercy. Warriors train from birth in combining psychic powers with swordplay. Elite knights ride red dragons, young ones serving their term of service. And those silver swords? They're more than just weapons. These blades channel the force of the wielder's will, dealing psychic as well as physical damage. When you project your consciousness to the astral plane, a silver cord connects your soul to your body. Githyanki knights can cut that cord with their blades. Instant death. Their astral ships, ironically stolen Mind Flayer technology that the Githyanki discovered during the Great War, descend on unsuspecting worlds in the dead of night. The Githyanki scour the worlds of the material plane in these vessels, ideal for carrying troops and the spoils of their raids. Red dragons lead the charge, serving as outriders and shock troops to pave the way, raining fire from above while warriors teleport into the chaos below. In battle, the Githyanki use mobile tactics, combining psionics and magic to devastate their foes. They don't conquer, they devastate. They hit hard, setting buildings aflame and killing all in their path to foster panic that cripples any hope of organized defense. Buildings burn, defenders fall, treasures vanish. And here's the cruel genius of their strategy. They always leave survivors. Because the Githyanki strike to plunder rather than conquer, raiders linger over their target for no more than a few hours. By daybreak, the attackers are gone, just enough survivors to rebuild, to prosper again. So the Githyanki can visit the place years or decades later and lay it low all over again. It's sustainable evil. When raiders do their best to honor Vlaakith by savaging their target, killing creatures indiscriminately, taking whatever treasures catch their fancy. When one of the astral vessels returns home after a raid, it's laden with spoils. Vlaakith makes no specific demands, but allows each individual raider freedom of choice in what they bring back. Some might seek exotic spices and herbs, while others pillage to find scrolls or tomes of knowledge. Tunarath is cluttered, if not crowded, by a nearly infinite variety of objects pirated from other planes, ranging in size from enormous buildings down to the smallest pieces of exquisite jewelry. Between raids, they live in a strange paradise. The astral plane provides everything. No hunger, no thirst, infinite time. As a race bred and shaped by the Mind Flayers for a life of fighting, the Githyanki never knew anything else while they were enslaved. Now, even with the constant flow of raids, they're no longer constantly at war. And keeping her people occupied in the interim is perhaps Vlaakith's greatest challenge. They should create, build, advance. They don't. Tunareth is littered with half-finished sculptures, partially completed frescoes, unfinished works of all sorts. The Githyanki, bred for war, find no satisfaction in peace. They flip from hobby to hobby, craft to craft, never settling on one endeavor for long. Every project ends the same way: bored, abandoned, forgotten. The Githyanki simply abandon personal projects that bore them, and every such endeavor they undertake ends in this manner. Yet despite the decadent lifestyle they indulge in, they remain in fighting shape. All are required to attend weapon and combat drills, which serve as a brief respite from their boredom. Vlaakith arranges contests, scavenger hunts, trials to keep her servants involved in purposeful activity. But the attraction of such diversions wears off after a brief time, so they wait for the next raid, the next hit of adrenaline, the next taste of violence. When Githyanki aren't on raids or missions for Vlaakith, they enjoy a languid existence in Tunareth. With an infinite amount of time on their hands, they crave novelty. They expect every returning raid to provide new forms of entertainment. This preoccupation with newness stands at the hollow center of Githyanki culture. They dabble in creating art, but never master it. They stand among treasures taken from countless worlds, but are never truly appreciative of them. Here's the paradox at the heart of Githyanki culture. They value freedom above all else, more than life itself. Few Githyanki would ever surrender in battle, preferring death to captivity. As if the fear of enslavement weren't enough, failure on a mission is considered a capital crime, barely short of betraying the Lich Queen. And yet, they live under the absolute rule of an undead tyrant. They follow orders without question. Disobeying a knight, one of Vlaakith's enforcers, amounts to treason. So where's the freedom? It's in the small things. They're free to speak their mind, though most avoid taboo subjects like religion or rebellion because they're considered socially unacceptable. Free to do as they please in their own homes. Free to travel without accounting for their movements. And they're free to express their individuality in combat. What looks like a regimented line of warriors breaks into controlled chaos when it meets the enemy. Each fighter has their own style, their own flourishes, their own battle cries. They decorate their baroque armor with feathers, beads, precious metals. They style their hair, red or black, often pulled into one or more topknots. They create their own unique combat maneuvers. Each Githyanki strives to create their own unique style, expressed through the ornamentation of their armor and weapons, the style of their hair, and the adornment they wear, and even in their particular combat maneuvers. Among themselves, Githyanki are unfailingly polite, respectful, even refined. But to everyone else, ruthless, cruel, sadistic. The Githyanki are in some ways a living contradiction, ruthlessly cruel and sadistically violent toward almost all non-Githyanki, but unfailingly polite, respectful, and even refined among their own kind. The key to this paradox is their self-identity. The Githyanki have never forgotten they were slaves of the Mind Flayers for generations, and they blame everyone but themselves for that fact. 1,000 years of hatred and resentment has corrupted their entire culture into a seething cauldron of violence directed toward anything that isn't included in their own circle of fellows. Their society has no family units, no bonds of affection. The closest relationship a Githyanki is likely to have is with their mentor and those they train themselves. The training relationship is the philosophical and practical ideal of interaction between Githyanki. In a perfect world, a Githyanki would learn from every word they hear and likewise instruct with every word they utter to the ultimate betterment of the species. Githyanki society despises all other races, undertaking devastating raids from their strongholds in the astral plane to the far-flung corners of the multiverse. War is the ultimate expression of Githyanki culture, and their pitiless black eyes know no mercy. Their hatred burns brightest for two groups. First, Mind Flayers. Every Githyanki must kill one to come of age. The crusade against the Illithids defines their identity. Of all their enemies, the Githyanki most hate their former masters. But second, the Githzerai, their own kin. Zerthymon's followers, their close kin, are second in their enmity. The Githyanki refuse to honor them with Gith's name. They call them Zerai lovers, betrayers, traitors. All other creatures are treated with simple contempt by the Githyanki, whose xenophobic pride defines their view of inferior races. Each Githyanki city launches an assault into Limbo at least once a year. The fortresses of the Githzerai on Limbo are virtually unassailable, so the Githyanki generally strike caravans and smaller compounds, causing as much damage and fear as possible before withdrawing. The Githzerai retaliate with full-scale assaults on Githyanki fortresses on the astral plane. Huge battles, many casualties, but no real victory for either side. This enmity between the two peoples is a gap that may never be bridged due to each society's diametrically opposed ideals. But imagine if they ever put aside their differences, worked together toward their shared goal, the annihilation of the Illithids. Were the Githyanki and Githzerai ever able to work together, the Mind Flayers would scarcely stand a chance. There's a whisper in Tunarath, a heresy spoken only in shadows, found in ancient writings on inscribed discs banned by Vlaakith's followers. According to ancient heretical writings, Orpheus was the son of Gith. The prince of the comet lives. Orpheus is not dead. He's imprisoned somewhere, held captive by the Lich Queen, and the truth of the War of the Comet has been covered up. The histories tell us that Commander Voss pierced Prince Orpheus clean through with his silver sword, that his flesh was torn and fed to the great red dragon of Philemon. Vlaakith's faithful roar out this tale, but beneath the roars, whispers carrying truth and prophecy. The Prince of the Comet is not dead. The Prince of the Comet will come again. The Prince of the Comet will liberate us from Vlaakith's tyranny. For all her power, for all her seeming invincibility, Vlaakith finds herself in an awkward situation that, in her paranoid mind, has no easy resolution. If she keeps her people too busy with raids, she risks her best warriors and marauders becoming experienced and powerful enough to challenge her rule. If she sends out too many raiding parties at one time, Tunarath's security might be compromised, so she doesn't deal with the problem directly. She tries to encourage her indolent followers to find purpose in meaningful activities that don't involve plundering and killing. She isn't always successful in that effort. The Githyanki remain what they've always been: warriors, conquerors, children of Gith, stuck between the freedom they won and the chains they forged for themselves. Long gone are the days when the Gith race was fully embroiled in conflict. When the Githyanki settled Tunarath and took up residence in the astral plane, they no longer had to fight constantly for survival. The mission laid out by Vlaakith in her grand proclamation remains of utmost importance. Her rule remains absolute. Yet to an outsider in Tunarath, it might seem as though the place is in decline. In a way, the Githyanki are victims of their own success. The Githyanki won their freedom, broke the most powerful empire in the multiverse, became legends, and lost their souls in the process. They overthrew tyrants only to crown a Lich Queen who devours them. They broke their chains only to forge new ones from silver swords and dragon scales. They are what happens when the oppressed become the oppressors, when survival becomes sadism, when freedom becomes just another word for nothing left to lose. The next time your D&D party encounters Githyanki raiders descending from the stars, remember this. They're not just monsters. They're a cautionary tale with silver swords. A civilization-sized tragedy playing out across the cosmos, one raid at a time. And somewhere in the shadows of Tunarath, loyalists still whisper, "Praise be to Mother Gith, Queen of the One Sky. Praise be to your son, Orpheus, the true heir, Prince of the Comet." Will he return? That's a question that could reshape the entire multiverse. But one thing's certain. Whether Orpheus comes again or not, the raids continue. The silver swords flash, the dragons roar, and the children of Gith remain both free and forever enslaved. by their own hatred, their own history, and the undead queen who promises them glory while feeding on their souls. If you want to know how to actually fight these cosmic nightmares in your campaign, their tactics, their weaknesses, and the one thing they fear more than enslavement, that's next week's video. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. Welcome to the Githyanki. Try not to stay too long.